In this video, I want to share with you my experience brewing on the Anvil Foundry 18. I want to go through all the times to heat up, to boil, chilling, all that stuff, and a critical measurement that I forgot in the first look video. Okay, actually, I have a confession to make. This is really not my first brew day with this system. And the first brew day that I had was really a disaster, and it's all my fault. Let me just start by saying that. I tried to brew a wheat beer with this thing. I disregarded the instructions in the manual that said use rice hulls if you're using like a flaked adjunct or something that's really sticky. And it was a total disaster. It was a 50% wheat grain bill. It clogged up the mash something fierce. I mean, so bad I had to scoop out all the grain and the liquid and everything, use one of my brew bags for my 20-gallon Blickman kettle, put everything back in. It was a total disaster. But, the beer actually came out okay. I didn't sparge like I was supposed to. I mean, I just kind of almost abandoned the whole thing. But suffice to say, you have to use rice hulls with this system if you're doing rye or wheat or any flaked adjuncts or anything like that. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, and because I always share with you guys the good, the bad, the ugly, no matter what. So there's my confession. It's more of a cautionary tale. Maybe it's a confessionary tale. I went ahead and bought like 10 pounds of rice hulls. I think I paid like 20 bucks for 10 pounds. I don't know if I think it's a pretty good price. I'll leave a link for the stuff that I bought off of Amazon down in the description so you can get some if you need some. But I thought, I'm going to be brewing a lot of other beers on this thing. I want to try to do a 15-gallon batch, so I just got a bunch of rice hulls and just took it all out of the equation altogether and was ready to go. All right, let's take a look at the first brew day. I'm actually brewing a porter for this particular beer. I wanted to brew something, Kelly wanted me to brew a porter, so hey, she wants it, she gets it. So let's take a look at the recipe on it. Okay, so the recipe on it is 66.8% two-row, 19.1% Munich Light, 7.6% flaked oats, 2.9% Carafa 3, 2.4% chocolate malt, and 1.2% black malt. Special shout out to Northern Brewer for providing us with the grain for this recipe. They've been helping us, supporting us with some grain and other things for different videos, so we certainly do appreciate their support on it. Go check them out. I'll leave a link in the description down below. So I did use the Blickman grain mill to crush the grain on this. And it's hard to really give you like a particular crush because it's completely different. It's got like 6-inch rollers. It's not really, you can't compare the gap on it to a regular mill. But just showing you here what the crush looked like, it's about the same type of crush as like a credit card gap on a normal mill. It does treat the husks a little bit more gentle, but a credit card gap is about the same as what the setting is on the Blickman mill that I was using. Now, as far as the water goes, it was 12.49 gallons of water. And so I used my RO water for that. And then, of course, I did add some salts to it, added calcium chloride, added gypsum, added some Epsom salt, as well as some lactic acid to be able to bring the pH down in the roughly about 5.3 range, something like that. Turned it on, cranked the power up to 100%, set my strike temperature at 158 degrees, and started a timer. And just wanted to see how long it would take to heat up that 12.5 gallons of water to 158 degrees. About 45 minutes later, it hit the 158 degree mark, which is not really too bad. It does have a 4,000 watt element, as I said in the previous first look video. Once I got up to strike temp, it was time to mash in. Now, what I did with the rice hulls, I actually added a half a pound of rice hulls to the mash. And I sprinkled some rice hulls in the initial, before I put any grain in at all. Then I just added some more grain, kept stirring and getting the mix really good. And then about midway through adding the grain to the mash, I added another little bit of rice hulls to it. And then as far as the oats go, I added those kind of at the end, hoping that they would kind of stay somewhere near the top of the mash and not get stuck down in the bottom and cause any kind of a stuck mash or anything like that. And then poured the rest of the rice hulls in there with the oats and everything just to try to make sure all of it flowed really well. Now, another important step for this particular system is waiting for like 10 minutes. And I do this on most all of the all-in-one systems. I'll wait for 10 minutes before starting any recirculation or anything like that. Lets the grains all get saturated, lets that conversion process start to take place. And then once the 10 minutes is up, I started the flow on it, and I was pretty hesitant because of my first experience not using any rice hulls. So I really had the flow down very low, And I watched it for probably about 5 or 7 minutes and noticed that, hey, it's flowing really well. Everything is looking pretty good. So I wanted to try to push it a little bit. I cranked it up a little bit more. And, the nice thing about the system is that the top hooks on the basket will kind of allow you to see down in there and kind of gauge where the liquid is. It's hard sometimes to look in these things and see exactly where the liquid is, how high from the top of the kettle it is or whatever, or seeing how far down it is. So once I turned it up, I noticed that it had dropped down to the level of the hooks, and I let it run for a little longer, probably another 10 minutes or so, and then checked it again. I noticed that it was actually a little bit below the hooks, so I turned the flow down just a little tiny bit, not much, probably like a half a turn on the clamp. And I did get the recirculation kit for the system. And if you're new to Anvil foundries and you haven't seen the recirculation kit, basically it is a small pump, a a disc that sits in the top of the mash basket. It's got some hose that comes with it, like 4 pinch hose clamps. And then it's instead of like a valve or something like that, like a ball valve, it actually has like a pinch type flow control for the system. So basically using that, I turned the flow control like about a half a turn just to turn it down a little bit, and then continue to check it as I went through. And I noticed that, when I turned it down a little bit, it came back up to the level that I thought it should be at, and just continued to let it go on through there. As far as the mash temperature goes, I was mashing at 150 degrees, and it held the mash temperature, throughout the entire mash. I saw it dip down to about 149. Probably every maybe 10 minutes or so, it would drop down to 149, then it would kick on and come back up. It would go back up to 151, and then it would settle back to 150. But I'll tell you, the element didn't run hardly at all on this thing while I was doing the mash. And I about a halfway through, it was still holding the mash really well. You can see here my Brewfather timers going, and I'll show you the mash temperatures is holding rock solid at 150. So I mashed for the remainder of the 60 minutes, and then raised it up for mash out temperature. And I know we always get teased about that. You forgot to raise for mash out. But I talked to one of the engineers, and they did recommend that you raise the temperature for mash out, just kind of loosen things up a little bit, which is kind of what I've been saying all along. So it was kind of vindication to hear somebody else say the same thing I've been saying. But I raised it up to 170 degrees, started a timer on that, and it took about 5 or 7 minutes for it to get up to 170 degrees. Now, that was obviously the temperature below the basket. I don't think that the entire, mash got up to 170 degrees in 5 minutes, but I let that run while I heated up my 2 gallons of sparge water in the 6.5. And once I got all of the sparge water up to temperature, then it was time to pull the basket. And I will tell you that I was a little concerned because, I knew that I had a lot of grain in there, and there's a lot of water and everything in there. So it was just kind of one of those things, prep yourself or get a friend or a pulley. Pulled the basket up. It wasn't too awful bad. It was definitely a chore for sure, but got it up to the first catch. And then it was time to go ahead and sparge. So I took my first gallon of sparge water and poured it over top of the mash basket. And the plate actually did a really good job with the bottom hooks in the kettle and the top hooks holding it up, part of the way out of there. Everything was pretty level. So, pouring the water over and all that stuff, it kept a nice even amount of liquid on top of the distribution plate for the recirculation. And then after I did the first gallon of sparge, it seemed like the level came up really quickly in the kettle, and it was actually up touching, or actually the bottom of the basket was partially submerged. So there was time to prepare myself to pull it the rest of the way out. Wasn't nearly as tough pulling it up to the second hooks as it was the first, but it was still a little bit of effort. So, obviously if you're not as strong as I am, or, if you're shorter or whatever, you probably want either a friend or a pulley to help you with this for sure. Once I got it up to the second hooks, then it was time to finish the second gallon of sparge. I tilted the plate just a little bit in the top of the basket because of the fact it was leaning, so I kind of wanted to have an even area to pour the liquid over. Was really happy with how the sparge and everything came out with that. Once I got everything sparged, I pressed on the grain a little bit to try to get some more of the liquid out. It had slowed down to a pretty good trickle, so I pulled it out, stuck it in a bucket off to the side to kind of let it drain a little bit more. Now, once I got everything collected, I was supposed to have a volume of right at 12 gallons with a pre-boil gravity of 1.056. So I took a sample, chilled it down, and used the Anton Par Easy Dens. Took a gravity reading, and the gravity reading came out at 1.056. So everything was right on the money. I had the mash efficiency set on 70% and basically would hit that completely. On top of that, once I got done draining all of the runnings out of the basket, I dumped that into the kettle as well, which gave me about probably 12 and a quarter, 12 and a half gallons, something like that. Once I got everything collected, I bumped it up to boil, put the controller on 100% power, and let it come up to a boil. I started a timer, and right around the 28-minute mark, it actually came up to a really vigorous boil. A lot of protein, so much so that I actually had to turn the element off. Just turned it down to 0% and let everything die back down before I actually cranked it back up to 100%. And I wound up probably boiling, I think it was like 90 or 95%. I wound up going through the remainder of the boil. But once I got it up to a boil, added the hops. At the 15-minute mark, I put in the chiller, and you might see the swirly in the video here. I did try to use that, but just had a lot of trouble with hops clogging up the pump and everything. So I will do a full review on that device in another video. I was hoping to kind of combine a little bit of information with it on here, but I should have used a hop spider or a hop basket or something like that if I was going to do the swirly. So that was a no-go on that. So once I got to the end of the boil, then it was a matter of, cranking the chiller on and chilling the batch down. I did start a timer because I wanted to see how long it would take to chill down the batch. I don't know if you guys remember seeing my first Anvil 10.5 Foundry video. I had the chiller sprayed water everywhere. I had a similar incident with this, but it wasn't at the chiller connection. For some reason, the hose had a cut in it. I don't know. I got to contact Anvil and get another hose, but it was spraying all over the brewery as well. So I don't know what it is with me and these Anvil cooling systems, but we don't have a good relationship right now. So it wound up taking between 18 and 19 minutes to chill down the batch to 76 degrees. Once I got it to pitching temperature, I took another sample and took a reading with the Anton Par Easy Dens. My original gravity was supposed to be 1.059, and I took the reading with the Anton Par, and it actually wound up being 1.060. So I hit the numbers almost dead on the money. The volume was there, the OG was there, everything was good. Like I said, 70% efficiency on the mash. I'll leave a link for the recipe in the description down below. I'll also provide Thomas, the creator of Brewfather, with the profile for the system, because I'm pretty sure that I've got everything pretty well dialed in. With the 2-gallon sparge, that's a gallon more than what they have in the manual to do with this. But I talked to one of the engineers, and he says that 2 gallons is probably the maximum sparge that you should do with the system, because of grain compaction and all that stuff. So by the time these hit the market, I will have Brewfather with the profile in it. So just be on the lookout for that. So the one measurement that I forgot, and I should have thought of this, was how much room do you need to be able to take the basket completely out of the system? I measured a bunch of different things about how tall the basket was and so on the hook and all that kind of stuff, but I did not give a measurement of how much room you need. So my calculations, based off of hanging it from a pulley system, is right around 63.5 inches, somewhere around there. You might be wondering about the bottom of the kettle after the boil, whether there was any scorching or anything like that. I did take everything out of the kettle, rinsed it out, no PBW, anything like that. Here is the video of the bottom of the kettle after the boil, after rinsing everything out. No burn marks, anything like that. And just to kind of prove it to you, I'm gonna take a rag and everything just wiped right out of the bottom with no burn marks, no nothing like that. So definitely, the 4,000 watts is a lot, but they were able to pack it in there in a low wattage density element that I didn't have any scorching with. Overall, the brew day went really well. I mean, there was nothing really that was an issue at all. I mean, I can't complain about anything. I hit my numbers, I hit my volume. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know. I know a lot of you were looking forward to this first brew day to see if you were interested in the system or whatever. How does this brew day, what does this brew day do to your opinion? What do you think about the rice hulls, all that stuff? Leave me a comment down below and let me know. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. We certainly do appreciate your support. This has been Brian for Short Circuited Brewers. We'll see you on the next video.